All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you, Kat, for arranging this. Today, we do have, I believe, a very interesting topic, and that's spectrum fusion. I think all of us are aware of spectrum fusion. We may not be terribly up to speed on what it does or how it does it, or even more important, the benefits of what it does. Uh, but we've got an excellent group of people with us to talk about this. And Kat briefly mentioned we have Jignesh Patel on here, who is an IBM Spectrum Storage sales specialist. And we have Mark James on, who has very graciously offered to attend while on vacation. He is an IBM storage software sales specialist. And one of my colleagues, Erin Scott, is on. She is a senior sales enablement leader working with the Spectrum Fusion group. So I think we have an excellent group of people here today to talk about a very important subject, namely spectrum fusion. Um, and, one of the things about spectrum fusion is that it makes Red Hat OpenShift container environments simple and effective. Now, it's easy to say, but that may not mean as much to folks who aren't terribly familiar with it. So Jig or Mark or Erin, would one of you want to maybe expound a little bit on that statement about making Red Hat OpenShift simple and effective?
Yeah, I think I could start with that. One of the first things that I think when we talk about this, right, it's always new, right? Containers to a lot of people are new, especially in our storage arena. And we're now saying, hey, position it to go sell uh, this space, right? This selling this container space. And one of the first things I'd love to kind of talk about is people talk about Kubernetes, right? And how it's great as an open source. OpenShift, when Red Hat is going and positioning they're basically talking about how they're making Kubernetes easy to go use. Where we then say is we're taking OpenShift and making Fusion's making OpenShift even simpler and easy to deploy. I think that big kind of combination, right? And saying, okay, a customer is looking for an easy button, something just simple to go deploy and, eliminate the necessity on the operations teams, right? To try to avoid that, right? Just to try to make them get going. I think that's key, is to say, okay, OpenShift is making Kubernetes easy, and Fusion is making OpenShift easy. What it kind of means is now I'm trying to tackle these things, right? The best example that we kind of saw, and I see that in some of our stuff, is putting a car together, right? If you're the mechanic that likes to put cars together, right? Old automobile, putting it together, yeah, Kubernetes is probably for you, right? If you want the, simple, hey, I want to put the car, I want to buy it myself as a full-fledged car, that's kind of open shit. I'd even take Fusion as this is Uber. That's kind of where I was going. Like, let me just go take this. This is where I want to go. And I'm making my destination simpler to get to. I think that's a great example, right? I think we did kind of talk about how Kubernetes is kind of piece parted, right? And we're kind of putting that together. You're tinkering around with it. OpenShift is kind of like, hey, it's already prepackaged, ready to go. I'm good, but I still got to drive it. I take OpenShift, I take Fusion as, hey, this is Uber, right? Just get me there. And I know I've been using more Ubers than driving myself when I get to a destination, right? Somewhere. So I think that's kind of the easiest way to kind of put that together, right? I'm pre-packaging the storage, the networking, the servers, right? Making it as optimal as possible in best case scenarios that IBM foresees. Red Hat is making OpenShift as best case scenario, as easy and to deploy. Yes, it could eliminate some of the customizations, but it drives simplicity, right? And easy reuse kind of scenarios. That's kind of how I see it.
That is actually excellent. I myself have used the car analogy and talked about, Kubernetes being, here's the car disassembled, and our job now is to package it all together and make it work. And Red Hat is, here's the car ready to go. I've never taken it that next step. I really like that idea that, now that's Uber. Let's just let it take you somewhere and, just relieve you of all the duty, the hard stuff that's involved. So that's actually a fantastic extension of that scenario. I love that.
What do you do when you're in an Uber? You do other stuff, right? You're doing other things.
Absolutely.
That's the whole point. Go do other things. Don't spend time on this.
Absolutely. Oh, that's fantastic. I really like that. Now, for the folks who may not be as up to speed on Fusion, Fusion is basically available two ways. It's available essentially as an appliance, what we'll often hear people talk about as HCI, and it's available as software only. Do one of the three of you want to touch on that a little bit and maybe help flesh that out and let folks know what can happen? Because some people, I think, are also surprised to find out you can run that in the cloud.
I can take that too if anyone else wants to chime in as well. But obviously, as you had mentioned, Roger, right, that we can deliver this in two ways. We can deliver it as the standalone software, right? That standalone software, and this is why it's in our storage portfolio, is really driving the data services around it, right? That is typically a point of secondary thought. Let's put it that way, right? We talk about OpenShift and Kubernetes. That's usually driven in the DevOps side of it. They're really kind of going gun ho and just trying to really get the application to a point that they need to do. A lot of the data services aren't taken into consideration. So Fusion in itself, it was designed around protecting and ensuring the data availability for this workload, right? That's kind of been a secondary afterthought, right, in the past. So Fusion came about with that data services in mind, making sure we can provide data protection, HADR capabilities, even just being able to interrogate some of that with some metadata, right, pieces, right, as well. That can be ran on an OpenShift cluster that a customer has designed already. You can deploy it in the cloud, as you mentioned, Roger, right? We have now AWS, GCP, et cetera, right? All the support, right? They're all kind of coming within this next quarter or so. We'll have all of them kind of covered. Or if a customer has deployed this on VM, right, and delivered OpenShift on VMware, we can provide that data services, creating a common platform, right, for all of that. That's what's key. The HCI takes that a step further in saying, if I haven't even deployed an OpenShift cluster on-prem, I can go purchase this easy button that essentially packages that entire thing together and give you the OpenShift cluster pre-installed. I think one of the beauty of the HCI is that I can deliver that and have it running in a day once it lands on my data center floor. I think that's huge, right? If I've already optimized all those things, we've seen our clients go through the struggles of even setting an OCP cluster. Even though we say OCP is designed to make Kubernetes easy, they still struggle once you start getting into creating the cluster of environments and dealing with the data. How do I make sure that it's protected, resilient, right, redundant? and copied over, right? That there's all those things that kind of get a little complex. The fact that if I'm taking all of that, even this is that Uber analogy, right? Now I'm kind of saying, all right, now just I'm giving you the whole box. Go concentrate on that DevOps, IT departments. I'm going to give you a single pane of glass to easily monitor this environment really quickly. It makes it simple. I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about it. SDS versus HCI.
Yeah, no, I was going to chip in. I know that's great, Jake. DevOps are constantly focused on building new features within an application, and they don't always want to spend the time or have consideration for that high availability and disaster recovery that Fusion is all packaged in for that application. I mean, applications are more valuable than ever now for organizations, and Fusion is really that easy button for the DevOps people in having HA and DR data services.
All right. Well, that's actually really helpful. And either way, whether we have a client who chooses to do it as a software only implementation or as a hyper-converged infrastructure appliance-based solution, what does scaling look like on this? How far can they go? I mean, admittedly, most clients aren't going to be using exabytes of data, but what is Fusion able to do from a scaling standpoint?
So I'd say from a scaling point, it can be massive, right? And it ties in some of our Red Hat components, right? Including Red Hat cluster management. It allows for multi-clustered environments, right? And so with that, I can go to the cloud, I can go on-prem. This is going to be a central crux of our hybrid cloud story, right? I think it's going to get stronger as we continue to message, and IBM's been messaging a lot about hybrid cloud. I think customers are now realizing that. Right? Going to the cloud is not as easy as everyone thinks, right? I can't just do the standard lift and shift. I have to go optimize. And even in that optimization conversation, should I even move it to the cloud now, right? And so this platform allows for that scalability, the performance and the capacity side of it, right? And being allowed to kind of linearly kind of grow either one, right? I can grow compute, I can grow storage if I need to, and I can expand accordingly to how I need to grow. But it allows that flexibility, right? That I can stay on-prem, I can go to the cloud if I need to, because we're seeing that. We're seeing clients even talk about moving from the cloud back on-prem. Now, how do I do that, right? And so now they're realizing maybe sometimes the costs are way too significant in the cloud on how they're approached, right? Why not I come back on-prem? And this is where HCI or SDS can really shine, right? Is providing a simple platform to come back to and make it as easy for that transition back as well. So a lot of different stories that, we've heard a lot, right, from different clients. But scalability is one of those things that allows for it, right? The flexibility of the performance and capacity.
Well, and thank you. You said a couple things during that explanation that I was really glad to hear because I just, from a personal standpoint, have grown tired over the last few years of listening to everybody talk about cloud, cloud, cloud. Like cloud is this magic panacea for storage. And you specifically touched on something that, see, it gives me goosebumps. That shows how much of a nerd I am. But you talked about how people discover how expensive the cloud can be. And at that point, a lot of people feel trapped. So when you said, hey, and it's easy to also just bring it back on-prem, that's a huge plus that I can have Fusion in whatever form I'm utilizing, SDS or the appliance-based HCI, on-prem, in the cloud, out on the edge. But the fact that I can move all that data to where it's most appropriate, either from a performance standpoint, a security standpoint, a cost standpoint, that's massive. I mean, that really is significant. Now, I'm curious about something, and any of the three of you, and Erin, don't be shy. Do you guys have, I shouldn't say guys, sorry, do you, the panel, have examples? We don't necessarily need names, but do you have examples of some really good client wins, client successes? Not just that IBM won a deal with a client, but hopefully that, hey, the client is really benefiting from utilizing Fusion.
I don't know if Erin, do you want to speak to anything right now? I don't want to keep hogging this spotlight here.
Oh, Erin, I believe you're on mute.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, not for client wins so much. That's actually what we're working on putting together from an enablement standpoint to add to Seismic, but I can't really speak on it just now. But if anyone in the field wants to share what they've been working on, I think that might be better.
Okay, so Jig or Mark, if either of you have some examples. I know people ask me all the time, well, who have we won this with? What is it that it did for them that allowed us to put this, relatively new thing into their infrastructure?
So I think Mark and I are kind of working on one, right? It's still in the works, right? But I think we're getting closer because I think it hits a lot of use cases for the client. Because one of those other things is talking about that this HCI appliance, when we run OpenShift container platform on bare metal, because that's a key thing too, right? Versus a virtual environment or the cloud. When we run it on bare metal, the licensing is actually cheaper. But the other advantage is that you can actually run virtualization on top of it. So you can create this environment that's also built for virtualization, for VMs, right? So now you can have the VMs and the container workloads running side by side. So this is one of our clients, and Mark will kind of expand on it. But that's the use case that we're starting with, but we're providing a more modern platform that can then run containers natively, along with the VMs side by side. So we're very close on that. But Mark, if you want to kind of talk to that.
Yeah, no, and I will do. Just before I go to that particular example, we're deep in the weeds on with the customer. We do have another one of the big wins we've had in America. I don't think we can actually say the name yet, but a pretty substantial bank in finance. And they were already they're a big believer in hyperconverged. So they had Nutanix for VMs, and they were looking for a similar experience for containers. And they did a big evaluation of the market, a lot of bake-offs, and IBM won with Fusion HCI for hyperconverged for containers. And it's proven to be very successful. We're already on our second and third phases now, and it's really grown within the bank to the point that it's now part of their data center modernization program. And we hope to now start as we start winning. Some of those applications that were VMs that are getting modernized to containers now are going to move over to Fusion. And then going back to what Jigs was saying, typically when a customer is looking at an app modernization or app migration, so a lot of times I say we're cloud first strategy now. We want to move this core application to the cloud. There's a lot of other interdependencies. Usually it brings with it other applications that it's dependent on, as well as infrastructure dependencies, and that kind of whole pod or that whole stack has to move together. And this is where Fusion HCI can be so valuable. We really can bring over a modern version of the application into containers and any interdependencies that are virtual machines. So whether it's a KVM machine, VMware machine, Hyper-V, can all come over to Fusion HCI. And as Jig was saying, on bare metal, there's an incredible savings on licensing costs. A lot of our customers out there, since VMware's been acquired by Broadcom, are seeing licensing costs really go up through the roof that they hadn't budgeted for. And with this customer that we're working on, that has been a trigger to really look at Fusion HCI as part of their infrastructure modernization. So, and obviously the best possible client is someone who's already fairly mature with containers and already using OpenShift container platform. I mean, that's ideal because Fusion just plugs enhances that. But we can even try and catch a customer a little bit earlier than that as well, where they really are looking how to modernize, whether from the infrastructure perspective or from the application perspective. If you're hearing out there that customers really want to try and modernize that app, it's so core to their business, we should be having a Fusion discussion, and that also then brings the conversation up to why Red Hat OpenShift for managing the Kubernetes environment as well. And the key value of OpenShift compared to other distributions is just all the automation. There's Red Hat own Ansible, and the same with Fusion. The question of scale before. One of the reasons why OpenShift and Fusion is so good at scale is the automation, and just it can like 100x the productivity of an individual managing that environment. So that's quite a lot there, but so big banks or big win that we're all excited about. This was just showing that it just keeps on feeding and growing and becomes core to modernization. And then Jigs and I are experiencing this real life, just as they're in this discussion of which container platform are they going to be moving to? There's a lot of Kubernetes is open source, so it seems like it's for free. But building that core yourself is going to just takes forever, and just so many layers of the security and the wrap around it. Whereas OpenShift and Fusion, you're up and running within the day, literally within hours, with enterprise hardened wrap around it as well.
That is fantastic, and I appreciate all that explanation. That's actually fantastic. And it certainly mirrors what I've been hearing, which is just how pleased the client base is because of that simplicity, that you've taken away so much struggle from the normal process they would go through. And I want to touch on something that you said and Jig mentioned earlier. I believe Jig had mentioned a little while ago about, we really want to do more than lift and shift. And hopefully the audience understands when somebody's talking about lift and shift, they're basically just saying, okay, I'm going to take what I've been doing on-prem and I'm going to shove it into the cloud, but I'm not going to modernize it. It's not going to be optimized. It's going to work, but I'm really not gaining the advantages that I could be. And one of the things I really like is that throughout this discussion so far, everybody has talked about modernization and the benefits of modernization. And that's really, when we start talking about containers, the idea that we can have these little tiny things that we can just span and spawn out there and easily replicate and scale, and then work on pieces of applications rather than this whole giant monolithic app, that is significant. And I really appreciate both of you mentioning the fact that we can do bare metal or we can be on a VM. This is really some incredible flexibility. Now, I have one question, and I probably should have talked to you guys ahead of time because it's always dangerous to ask questions when you don't know the answer. But what if a client has existing storage and sadly, maybe that storage isn't IBM, but can it be used with Fusion?
Yeah, I can take that one or start it off. I think a big benefit of Fusion is the fact that clients can utilize the storage and hardware that they already have and be able to access that data for applications. In this case, it might be on Red Hat OpenShift that they can manage and dictate the resources, set policies around it. And that's also a big benefit of clients that already have Red Hat OpenShift. For the developers and the admins, they don't have to kind of relearn the technology. It's already pretty much integrated with Red Hat OpenShift. It makes it easy to use and manage the storage that they already have.
That's fantastic because, man, that would make the sale a lot easier. And to me, the cool thing is, if we're able to utilize their existing infrastructure, but we're wrapping the most important piece, the control and the simplicity and the expansion and everything else, we've suddenly gained the upper hand. I mean, just hands down. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean we've brought in more value than the client had. And as they move forward, it's clear that they're probably going to listen to us and at least consider what we have to say, perhaps about future expansion. So that's fantastic. I'm really glad to hear that. We're almost at the end of our half an hour. So I guess I'd like to ask the three of you, is there anything each of you would just like to add, some point or points that you'd really like people to take away with them when they leave this broadcast?
Great question. There's a lot of things that we can kind of pick up on. I think the biggest thing is the simplicity side of it, right? I think that's what we're trying to drive, right? And the fact that I think a lot of confusion that starts with even our Red Hat brethren, right? When they're going out and having these conversations, even though it's being sold within our IBM storage portfolio, we do have a platform that includes the compute, networking, storage all together. I feel like the HCI, the appliance, sometimes people think it's just storage, right? They see the picture like behind you, right? They see that box and they think it's a storage device. This is not just storage, right? This is where the compute can land, right? We do have all the networking optimized and integrated within it. We need to be positioning that as a full platform, right? I think we get lost in that. And I feel like sometimes I've heard even from our Red Hat teams is that, oh, that was storage, right? That's a secondary afterthought. We should be going in together, right? Red Hat and IBM with HCI and their platform and kind of talking the whole stack holistically, right? And kind of going after it. Yes, we can reuse stuff that they have, but we should be working this together, right? But I think that's the biggest thing.
And Mark or Erin, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Erin, I'll go to you.
I guess mine would be more so from an enablement standpoint as we're putting together our plan for 2023 and getting ready to create the level 4 enablement. I welcome any and all feedback from the field to reach out to me personally as we're creating this plan to put out more enablement. And for those who've already taken the level 1, level 2, and level 3 course, feel free to let me know how you like it or how we can make it better for you to make it easier to digest.
Thanks, Erin. My last comments would be, I'm really excited about Fusion and Fusion HCI. It's from a sales perspective, it's a salesman's dream from a tool bag perspective. It allows you to be at the table having the conversation at whatever level makes sense for your customer and persona within that customer. So you can be right, the tip of the spear, working with the guys, how they're transforming their business, what they're going to be doing to modernize those applications for agility and business gain and efficiencies. And we can work closely with our, just so you're aware, our client, IBM Client Engineering will come in and actually prove out that app modernization. So we'll pick 2 or 3 apps and actually co-build and do a minimum viable product modernization with the customer and deploy that on Fusion or in the cloud if they want it either on HCI or public cloud. And as Jigs was alluding to, is that further down the stack, if we're talking to our infrastructure data center guys, it helps solve for them because things are moving so quickly and becoming as they try and build their data center to support infrastructure as code. Fusion HCI allows the guys in the data center to do that. So it's a great conversation with our existing infrastructure guys. And if you want to poke their head a little bit higher, where we're not all that comfortable with these app dev guys, very sophisticated, working on app modernization we can, and then again or even storage optimization as well. So we can be at we can play at so many different layers with IBM Fusion, and I think it's really exciting for all of us to be promoting and selling it this year. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And Mark, especially, thank you for joining us while you were on vacation. I really appreciate that. That's above and beyond the normal duty. And thank you to Erin, and thank you to Jignesh. And I will turn it back over to Kat.
Thank you, Roger. And again, thank you to our panelists. As a reminder to our attendees, this session was recorded and will be uploaded to our Mid-Market Tech Talk YouTube page, where you can obviously rewatch this recording or any of our past talks from last year. So with that, thank you so much for attending and have a good rest of your day. Thanks all.
Bye-bye.